Hey, today we're going to look at the first of four colonial subcultures which are settled during the early 1600s by the British and other groups. And we're going to look at how they developed differently from one another. So first off, you need to know that there's four subcultures. This is unlike the traditional three that's generalized as Middle, New England, and South. In this case, we're defining it a little bit more with the Chesapeake, New England, Middle Colonies, and the Lower South. This map shows us what colonial settlement patterns looked like by about 1660. You can see that most colonization is happening on the seaboard and possibly up some of the rivers, but not very much on the interior of the continent. So let's look first at the Chesapeake colonies. We'll cover the other two in other videos and also in class. So these two different maps show us what is modern day Virginia and Maryland, and you can see in Maryland on the Virginia border is the Chesapeake Bay. This is a major waterway both then and now, and it's the first area to be settled. If you look over on the right-hand map, you can see about 2/3 of the way down, Jamestown Island. This is the first permanent settlement in North America by the British, and it takes 3 attempts to make that happen. Okay, Chesapeake is first attempted to be settled by Sir Walter Raleigh with the Roanoke settlement. This does not go very well. They end up all disappearing. No one knows what happened to Roanoke, including his daughter and granddaughter are both lost in that attempted settlement. But he's looking to hopefully gain some wealth. He wants to build the British rivalry against Spain, Holland, and France. He wants to promote Angelicalism, which is anything but Catholicism, of course. And there's a real pushback against the Spanish and their dominance in Europe at the time. So there's different ways that all the colonies are settled. And the first colonies of Virginia, they're all settled through what are called joint stock companies, and these companies provide financing. The major obstacle to even getting to America was funding it, and Queen Elizabeth wasn't very fond of spending taxation money on these unknown ventures. So in 1606, King James issues the charter for the London Company, which allows the settlement of Virginia. And this image shows the seal of the Virginia Company. You can see a Native American with, those are not trees, those are tobacco plants and arrows. This becomes symbolic of their company. Okay, there's also these other images that are associated with the London Company, which is later renamed the Virginia Company, and English stockholders expect instant profits, but that doesn't necessarily happen. The entrepreneurs or settlers of Virginia is first settled in 1607 permanently. That's the first time it's permanently settled. Its location is very unhealthy because it's very swampy, but it's easy to defend because it's on an island and it's not far from the coast, but it's a little bit inland, which protects from weather and things like that. Most of the settlers, if not all, have almost no experience founding a settlement. They're soldiers by trade. Very few of them know how to grow food, build homes, things like that. So they're really ill-equipped to settle the colony. The colonists expected to come to America, gain immediate wealth, and just go home wealthy with a lot of glory. That does not end up happening. They experience very severe winters. They fail to plant crops the first winter they're there, and that leads to several what are called starving times, and really prolongs the permanent settlement of Jamestown. Chesapeake colonists don't work for the common good. They're mostly out for themselves, and that's why most of them starve to death. Okay, so here's an image of the Jamestown fort. It's a triangular shaped fort, and they know this because of archaeological digs that have taken place since then. And it is just on the coast there, not too far. And you can still go visit a reenactment area there today. Okay, so this is a map of the things that they had. They did, of course, have a church at the center of town, but this is the overall look of the fort itself, which is mostly wood from the area around. Okay, and here's another image. In the lower right-hand area there, you can see which look like holes in the ground. This is what archaeologists have discovered that give them the information that they use to build these replicas. Okay, and here is an image of the reconstructed Jamestown colony, which is what you can go visit, with a traditional style home from that period. In 1608, even though Jamestown is settled, it is not doing very well. Very few people are making money, very poor leadership, and a lot of harsh winters. It's really not a healthy situation. The soldiers who are there, instead of planting crops, resort to pillaging local Native American tribes, and that really creates a lot of conflict with the Powhatans and leads to a series of wars with them. So here's Captain John Smith. He looks a little bit different than you might expect, but this is a period image of him. Okay. The Powhatans are the most powerful Native Americans in that Mississippi River area. Okay, what ends up saving them is what's called the stinking weed, which is tobacco, and that's what the image is down there. John Rolfe, not John Smith, is the one who's going to introduce this to the European economy and to Jamestown, and what ends up being very successful. Now, how he got this product is somewhat controversial. He ends up stealing it, and everybody just kind of ignores what he did. But he could have gotten in a lot of trouble for stealing of tobacco. He, of course, ends up marrying Pocahontas, but that's not her. That's our Disney version. This is a little bit more what she would have looked like. She marries him, is baptized Rebecca, moves to England. They have several children, and she does end up dying very young. Early tobacco trade is, it takes off pretty quickly. 1618, there's only a production of about 20,000 pounds, but by 1629, there's 1.5 million pounds of tobacco. That's a huge increase. And it really turns out to be what saves the Virginia colony itself. And you can see this graph here. It does go from being quite expensive in 1618 to fairly cheap within 100 years, but the production is enough that it really does create quite an economy in Virginia. What is needed to produce the stinking weed is a lot of labor. And so 1618 headrights are what's going to be used to provide that labor and promote cultivation in Jamestown. For each colonist who sponsored the transportation of a servant over from Europe, predominantly Britain, to Virginia, was given a 50-acre lot. They would then use this lot to grow tobacco, and they were expected to provide these servants when they were released with certain items. Huge tobacco plantations grow out of this, with people sponsoring thousands of new settlers and hoping to make their fortunes that way. If we look at English migration between 1610 and 1650, you can still see the majority of people are going to the West Indies, which is the Caribbean region today. To North America, the majority are going to go to the Chesapeake and then New England, and still a pretty significant amount of Europeans go to Bermuda. In 1619, there's going to be the first major change in Virginia, and it's going to be a turning point, because in 1619, the Virginia colonists create the first legislative assembly in the New World, and it's going to be called the House of Burgesses, and it's going to be both the colonial government and make its way into the American Revolution. And in that lower right-hand corner, you can see the House of Burgesses building that was built for them to convene at. Let's talk about slavery for a second. The head right system or indentured servitude does not, even though it does provide a lot of settlers, it does not end up providing enough labor for what's needed, especially in the middle colonies in the South later on. So by 1619, we do have the first African slaves being imported by the Portuguese into the colonial region. 17th century, in the early 17th century, so that early part of the 1600s, we have about 1,000 slaves arriving per year. So, I mean, it's going to be pretty significant by the end of the 17th century. But then throughout the 18th century, an additional 5.5 million arrive in America. And by 1860, there's more than 11 million slaves that were brought to the New World. That does not include those that were born here as a result. And these are the numbers that we will be looking at when we get to the American Civil War. And just before 1831, more African slaves came to America than Europeans themselves, which I think really tells us a lot about what the economy, the initial economy and the building of America was based on. Okay, so this graphic, the larger the arrow, the more Africans that were brought. You can see the Gold Coast, the Congo, Angola, and Southeast Africa are the largest areas for exportation of slaves. Slavery is not new to Africa. We'll watch a video on that in class. But you can see the majority go to Brazil and the West Indies. Relatively little go to North America. A lot of our population of what will become African American slaves are through birth here. Many, many more go to the West Indies and Brazil regions of the New World. Okay, so this also shows our population of slaves. You can see the white line, the blue line, does continue to grow, and that's primarily through the growth of families. African American slaves or Black population grows significantly as well. But notice that the Native American population sees a significant decline over the 140 years that this covers. Okay, Maryland, the settlement of Maryland, is developed out of something totally different. It becomes a refuge for the Catholics. Sir Lord Calvert, or also known as Lord Baltimore, who Baltimore City will be named after, he wants to create a refuge for English Catholics. In 1632, Charles I issues the charter to him, and he recruits laborers that are willing to come to Maryland and settle and be more religiously tolerant. So Maryland does become a fairly religiously tolerant colony from the beginning. The majority of wealthy Catholics do not emigrate to America. They stay in Europe. So a lot of the population of Maryland are going to be poor Protestant farmers, indentured servants, and poor Catholics. Maryland has very few tobacco plants. Most farmers are subsistence farmers scattered along the riverfronts. Not very many large cities in Maryland initially. And that is it for today. We are going to look at the other three regions in class or through videos like these. Don't forget to fill out your outline, and I will see you in class.